Hello, and thank you for joining us for this short presentation brought to you by the Oregon Housing and Community Services Multifamily Energy Program. This short presentation is one module out of 4 covering intentional design for energy efficiency. In this module, we'll be talking about developing intentional design influenced scopes of work. Typically, scopes of work for the trades will be finalized after the intentional design meeting. But before we get to that, I want to bring up something that needs to happen very early on, and that is the scope of work for the energy efficiency champion. Typically, this is going to be the architect or the energy consultant for the project, and we want to ensure that the person who will ultimately take on the responsibility of being the energy efficiency champion has these responsibilities built into their scope of work. One of the most classic problems and hurdles to inputting new processes and technologies into projects is the dreaded words, "but this is not in my scope of work." So we want to make sure that we start from the very beginning with the energy consultant or architect or whomever will play this role of having these responsibilities into their scope of work. Next, we want to think about the scopes of work for the trades. And we want to make sure that as those scopes are being developed by the developer or the purchasing agent or the project manager, that the energy champion has in their scope the ability to review these and ensure the energy efficiency measures are carrying themselves through and that the correct responsibilities are assigned to those ultimately responsible for installing these measures or following these processes. Again, getting work done and focusing effort before scopes of work are finalized is a critical piece of intentional design and one of the best ways to reduce the overall project cost by spending a little time up front to reduce callbacks and missed opportunities during construction. Now we can talk about the success of actually working on the scopes of work for the trades. This is a multiple step process, and I'll walk you through each step. The first, we want to translate energy efficiency or indoor air quality or health or water savings or whatever the key measures are that you're going after. Translating these measures into responsibilities and then into the scopes of work for each trade. Our industry is fraught with much lingo, jargon, and acronyms. So we need to think, how will this translate to the actual scope of work for an HVAC installer or an electrician or the person who installs tile or completes the roofing? We really want to make sure that it's translated into the appropriate degree of language and that the roles and responsibilities are crystal clear. Next, we want to identify impacts to things like budgets, materials that may need to be purchased, and sequencing for each of these trades and for the project overall. We refer to these as the business impacts. So once you've put a measure into a scope of work for, let's say, the HVAC trade, what are the cascading impacts from this? Who else may be impacted in their timing, their sequencing, or the types of materials they're going to use to work around this? Consider this after you've put in your core measures. Look at the cascading impacts or the business impacts to the rest of the trades involved. Next, let's think about how our internal champion is going to provide quality control over this entire project. This is often done by 2 different measures. One is quality control checklists. These can be included in the scope of work. It may, for instance, say you should not, Mr. or Ms. HVAC trade, move forward with your project without these preconditions being ready for you when you show up on the job site, and you may not leave the job site or submit an invoice until X, Y, and Z on this checklist have been completed. Quality control checklists become the responsibility of the individual trade. On top of that, there's the in-field verification. In some cases, this may be M&V or commissioning that is done on equipment, but it may be third-party inspections that the work has been done correctly and been done to the appropriate and agreed upon standards. The final part is making sure that the correct trades and the correct people are actually involved. If we leave a trade out of this total sequence, if one of the final people responsible for trim, paint, and finishing does not have their scope of work reviewed and is not looked at for whether or not they will be able to complete their work with the budget and the scope of work that they've been given, that is a mistake if we cannot identify this early. Also, if there is a trade that is not capable of delivering on the energy efficiency measures, this is one of those scenarios where we have to ask, is this the correct trade then that is involved? We've found most of the time trades are willing to learn new things if they're given the opportunity, if they're provided the right amount of time, and if they're given the correct exposure to the steps that they'll need to take to do the work. It is relatively rare that you'll have to actually switch out a trade, but it is critical that we still review to make sure that the trades involved understand their responsibilities, understand the materials and products they'll need to be responsible for, and understand their own quality control. One of the other critical pieces here, again, is thinking about when is the right time to make changes and when is the right time for technical consultation. The answer here is going to be before scopes of work are finalized. So this may mean that whether it happens during the pre-construction meeting or the design charrette, or whether it's with one-on-one meetings, that each trade whose scope of work has been impacted has had a chance to review their scope of work with the energy champion, potentially the project manager, so that each step has been ironed out and any technical consulting that needs to be brought to the table can be done so before paperwork is signed and before responsibilities are finalized. And with that, this wraps up this module on the importance of the scopes of work in intentional design. This, again, is one of 4 small presentations or modules covering the scope of intentional design, and we hope that you will watch all 4 of them. Thank you very much.